That was one point. The second point that you make is people don't always know what you want. And that's so true. And so when we do these design type of, these design like interrogations, one of the things that you find is exactly what you said. You'll ask people what they want and they don't know. And so there's other forms of design probes you can use to, and speculative design is one of these things, where you can help prod people in certain ways. And so one of the things we do is we built lots of different things. So people can see possibilities of what can happen. And once people start seeing the possibilities of what could happen, it's easier for them to sort of like think outside of their comfort zone. Keep in mind though, that oftentimes what they come up with is like a weighted sum of these possibilities that you showed them. So we kind of bias them. But at the same time, we try to show them like capabilities of what's possible and then see what they do with it. If you ask somebody to, if you bring somebody to a table and just tell them like, what is the ideal thing you would want to build ever? People can't answer that question. People can't answer that question because there's too many axes for them to think about at that moment. If you constrain the problem for them a bit and say like, what is the best tool you would want to build for this situation? It's easier for them to answer that question. And at the same time, if you want, let me give another example just because it's easier. We were doing some studies around about content moderation. So a lot of people were upset on Instagram, for example, when their content was getting removed. Mm-hmm. So if I was an artist, let's say, and my images were getting removed because they showed nude figures, but that was what's expected in the art world, right? Or let's say that I was overweight and my images were removed from TikTok. And the argument they gave was they didn't want people to be shamed. For example, like, how do you have a voice against a big entity? Like, how would you want to communicate with an entity like this? And so, we brought in lots of people. They were like, I don't know, and so what we did is we had lots of different interactions. And in one of them, in some of these things, they're very concrete. In some of them, you make them to be like a little bit more fantastical. So in some cases, we designed interfaces with different forms of buttons and we let them rearrange where the buttons were. In some other situations, we told them that you could have a magic mug. And in this magic mug, what would you want to do? And people were like, well, I want to yell into this thing. And whenever I yell into it, it goes directly to the CEO's ears. And so the idea is you try to cover lots of different forms of communication. And then the first thing that you start seeing that comes out of the values that people have. And that's important because these companies need to know the values that people want in the tools that they use. And the second thing is like slowly you start to tease apart what people really want. And you have to engage them in conversation for quite some time. So these conversations, there were several of them and some of them lasted up to 3 hours each. And by the end of it, even as a designer, what we thought people wanted, we were kind of wrong. In the end, one of the consensus things that happened wasn't that they wanted more technology. They actually wanted a group of their peers to actually make decisions about content moderation and not an algorithm. Mm-hmm. So for example, let's say I'm an artist and let's say I'm Black. Why can't people like me make decisions about people like me? Why is it one algorithm fits all? Why is it people who are not like me making these decisions? And that came out over a series of iterations of some of these tools. And even if you think you want the solution to be a technology solution, oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes it has to be a human solution. And we have to be open to the idea that we need to have socio-technical systems that involve, sometimes technology, sometimes people, and sometimes both.